Good evening. Welcome to the August 20th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. We're glad you're here with us tonight. For those in attendance, there are copies of the agenda on either side of the room. For those watching at home, you can follow us through a link on our website at downers.us. In the lower left-hand corner, there's a current meetings list that'll take you to our agenda as well as links so you can see all the materials that the council has in front of them. We're going to start tonight's meeting by rising together and saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. April, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Commissioner Cullivaney?
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Earl? Here. Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Mayor Barnett?
Here. Thank you, April. I have a short statement here. We have a couple of agenda items tonight that we want to get some sense of who's here for what reason, help us better manage expectations and better manage the meeting. So the two items that have significant importance on tonight's agenda include recreational marijuana, the village's decision on whether to allow cannabis-based businesses. The other involves the future of the downtown and how we choose to address ongoing funding needs for downtown improvement and services. We're scheduled to talk about recreational marijuana here in council chambers first, in the first reading portion of our agenda. Our plan is to move to the committee room next door to discuss the future of downtown in a little bit more informal manner. The village is addressing recreational marijuana tonight on a comparatively tight schedule dictated by the state, so it needs to be considered beginning tonight. The village has a significantly longer timeline to address the future of downtown issues, and therefore it does not have to be considered tonight. So, if you would raise your hand if you're here to talk about recreational marijuana. Okay. And raise your hand if you're here to talk about the future of downtown. Okay, thank you. We're going to do recreational marijuana on the agenda as it's shown, and depending on how long that takes, we'll hopefully continue through the full agenda and talk about downtown next door. Depending on how long that takes, we may have to punt that to a future meeting. We'll try and get them both in tonight. Thanks for helping us here. First item on our agenda is a review of previous council minutes.
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next on our list, we have a proclamation this evening. The American Association of University Women Downers Grove Area Branch is experiencing its 70th, celebrating its 70th anniversary. So, whereas the Downers Grove Area Branch of the American Association of University Women, encompassing Downers Grove, Darien, Westmont, Woodridge, and Lisle, is celebrating its 70th anniversary, and whereas the Downers Grove Area AAUW supports the national organization's mission to advance equity for women and girls through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and research. And whereas this branch of the AAUW has held an annual used book sale for 61 years. And whereas this branch of the AAUW has participated in or held community events such as the 4th of July parades, Equal Pay Day marches, candidate forums, and voter registration drives. And whereas this branch of the AAUW provides leadership for tech-savvy conferences with STEM workshops for girls and participates in Dare to Dream motivational conferences. And whereas this branch of the AAUW continues to educate its own members and give them opportunities for personal and professional growth through book discussions, salary negotiation workshops, and engagement in the political process concerning legislation that positively affects women and girls. Now, therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of August 19th through the 23rd, 2019, as Downers Grove Area American Association of University Women Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and congratulate this branch of the AAUW on its many achievements and its laudable history of contributions to the community, to the advancement of women's rights and girls both locally and beyond, dated this 20th day of August, 2019, in Downers Grove, Illinois. I think we have with us Mary Ann Dion and Joyce Tomea, co-presidents, as well as Committee Chair Kim Venzian for the 70th anniversary. If you guys would like to come up, and everybody who's here, feel free to come on up. We'll take a photograph and present this. It's one of the fantastic longtime organizations in Downers Grove. It's great to see you guys here. Congratulations again. Okay, we have a process tonight and every night where we have public comments that we welcome. There are two versions of that. One happens right now before we get into the agenda. If anybody has anything they'd like to discuss that is not on tonight's agenda, we'll ask you to come down to the podium and tell us what's on your mind. If you'd like to speak on a subject that is on tonight's agenda, please wait until we get to that agenda item, and then we'll invite additional public comment then. So is there anything not on tonight's agenda that somebody wants to talk about this evening? Come on down.
Hello, I'm Jeff Horvath, 1629 71st Street. The issue that I'm want to bring up and concerned about is I've noticed a continued, and I think it's a growing problem in the village with the landscape companies mowing and placing their yard waste onto the village streets. And with all the rain we've had, in particular this spring and summer, many streets have been flooded. Many streets. I cite 71st Street, I cite Dunham right across from the high school. Of course, these are any low-lying area where the sewer is blocked. And I noticed that they seem to be out there without any real regard for where they're throwing and brushing this. So I've taken it up with the Public Works. Don't really feel that it's being addressed, and I just wanted to raise that because I know we're very intentional about stormwater runoff and things like that in the village. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments of a general nature? Okay, we'll move on then to our consent agenda. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Moves us to our active agenda. We have two items on our active agenda tonight. Is there a motion for an ordinance amending brew facility liquor licenses?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending the brew facility liquor license classification as presented.
Second.
Do we have anybody here from the audience that would like to discuss or address this issue? We're amending our liquor license ordinance as it relates to certain volumes of sale. Okay, any council comments? Questions? Okay, April, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolobani?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion amending school zone provisions?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending school zone provisions as presented.
Second.
Is there anybody here from the audience that would like to discuss our school zone provisions? We are modifying some traffic provisions relative to a school zone. It's a relatively common thing. Every year or so, we have to address similar things. Okay, any council questions? Comments? April, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolobani?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace? Aye. Mayor Barnett?
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. That takes us to our first reading.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. One item on tonight's first reading agenda, and you can see by the screen what it is. It's a discussion of recreational marijuana regulations. Just wanted to give you an overview of the few slides we'll be presenting here tonight. First, we'll talk about the state law, and then we'll talk about how that state law grants municipal authority and decision-making capabilities. And then we'll move into a discussion of the two options that staff has identified for the first part of village council and community discussion. So 3 parts to tonight's brief overview. We'll start with the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, which was recently enacted by the state of Illinois, which quite simply legalizes the possession and use of cannabis products starting on January 1st. And you can see by the screen, it is for persons 21 years of age and older, and within the act, it prescribes maximum amounts, limitations on the amounts of cannabis that can be possessed and used. The next key component of the act is that it's the state itself that licenses cannabis-related businesses. And these licenses are capped. According to the act, 500 licenses will be made available by 2022. And in this act, the state is divided up into several regions. The region in which Downers Grove is located will have 47 cannabis business licenses available at the state level. So again, it's the state that licenses cannabis-based businesses. The act does a number of other things too, including providing for the expungement of police records for qualifying previous cannabis-related offenses. And it does establish state-level sales taxes on cannabis-based products. And you can see on the screen the different rates based on the amount of THC contained in each of a variety of cannabis products. Pretty healthy tax rates there, from 10 to 25%. Good news to municipalities is the act does allow and call for the distribution of that state sales tax revenue to municipalities. So 8% of the total amount generated through the state sales taxes will be remitted back to municipalities based on population or per capita distribution. The revenue that municipalities receive must be used to help cover the costs of this program, including cost of expungement, law enforcement related issues related to this new law, and training of police officers, et cetera. How much money? The state does not yet have a projection. Part of that is because this distribution occurs net of state cost of administration, and they do not have a good handle on that. So we will continue to monitor, and when we have revenue projections, we will share it with the village council and community. In the act itself classifies, I think, 6 or 7 different types of cannabis-based businesses. They're up on the screen there, ranging from dispensary or retail sale all the way through transportation. And as we go through this conversation, if we get to that point later on, the rules and regulations for each of these businesses at the municipal level could vary. Under the Act, it does grant municipalities certain rights, and really there are 2 basic ones. That we have the right to establish regulations regarding cannabis-based businesses, zoning regulations, and to establish our own sales tax at the municipal level up to 3%. I highlighted in yellow here because I think there's been some confusion. The Act allows municipalities to regulate the business aspects, cannabis-based businesses, but it does not allow municipalities to restrict the private consumption of cannabis. So it will remain legal in all parts of the state, as described earlier, no matter what municipalities' rules are on cannabis businesses. As I was saying, the other thing we can do here is move forward with consideration of making our own local zoning regulations. These are the typical zoning regulations that we deal with on all other types of businesses. Enza will tell us these are time, place, and manner type restrictions. Think of things like how many of these businesses could be located in our village, where could they be located, usually by zoning district, hours of operation, distance requirements, those types of things. In addition to that, the Act does allow municipalities to regulate on-site consumption. Think of this like liquor licensing. Do we allow consumption to take place at an establishment, or is it only takeout for consumption elsewhere? On the sales tax side, the Act does allow local sales taxes up to 3%. These local sales taxes would be collected, administered, and distributed by the state. So even though it's a local tax that we could put on the sale, we do not have the administrative burden. The state does, much like sales taxes. On the revenue projections, just a note here in yellow, our zoning decisions, no matter what they end up being, do not guarantee the generation of local village revenues. If you think about it, we don't normally do revenue projections during zoning discussions. Just because we might establish a permissive use or a special use doesn't guarantee that a business is going to locate here. So right now, we're being very cautious, and we're not really putting out any revenue projections. It's a little premature, I think, for that kind of discussion. So options that staff has put together to help the council and community with this discussion, just two simple ones. Option A would be to an outright prohibition of cannabis-based businesses. And option B would be a consideration of establishing zoning regulations and tax rates. Some details on option A, the prohibition of cannabis-based businesses. This would be direction from the council at tonight's meeting, perhaps in a week or two, to go ahead and take steps to prohibit all cannabis-based businesses in the village. If that were the direction, this would be a pretty short process with very limited further discussion. Staff would work on preparing the proper ordinances. Those ordinances would make their way through the various approval boards and commissions, et cetera. And we would conclude this process by the end of the year, but with very few meetings. Option B is the consideration of zoning regulations and taxes. If the council directs option B, this is an extended process, likely with multiple meetings, with many options discussed, probably at a very detailed level. This would probably be similar to our rezoning of the downtown exercises and activities we went through a couple summers ago. So if the council directs us to do that, the next set of discussions would occur at the council level. We would get general direction on zoning-related and tax-related items. Then the zoning-related amendments to our ordinance would go to the Plan Commission for a public hearing. Probably have to do that in the October timeframe. Then the Plan Commission recommendations and an ordinance would make their way back to this village council, probably in November and December. And during that same time frame, from September through December, the council would be talking directly about the establishment of tax rates, sales tax rates at the local level. It is important to note that even if we start down this route, option B, it doesn't preclude us from a prohibition of cannabis-based businesses at the end of this discussion. So those are the two options we've identified for at least the initial council discussion. There's a lot more to this act, as you know, that we've been talking about, so we're happy to answer any questions the council may have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dave. On a first reading item, we're going to start with our council conversations and questions that we may have. Then we'll take conversation and questions from the audience. We'll circle back around to the council. We hope that our guests and visitors will take something away from the conversation they hear as we start the debate. These are more like a workshop item, so there'll be some back and forth dialogue and probably questions that come up that may not be answered this evening. So with that, are there any council comments or questions? Marge, you want to start?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the public that we actually already do allow medical marijuana dispensaries. We've been, had to allow that by law, and there were zoning regulations put in place, and nobody decided to locate here. So right there, that's where we're at. It's not that we hadn't been thinking about this before, but what we had thought about, this is where we're at. So I think wanted to make sure that they know, everybody knows that we've been talking about this for a while at different stages, and this has kind of been evolving. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Leslie?
Yeah, I more have questions or just things that I would like to see addressed if we continue. I think regardless of where we go on this issue, that it would really be to our benefit to collect all of the research that we can. I don't see a downside in at least considering it and getting all of the research about this topic, if not only for the fact of what you highlighted up on the screen, that consumption is still going to be legal in people's homes. And so it is in everyone's best interests if we can really understand everything that we can about recreational cannabis, regardless of what we decide to do come December. On that, things that I would really like to see in a little bit more detail before making a decision. I want to hear a little bit more from our police and our law enforcement about any impacts this may have, whether that be from DUIs to any sort of other impairment, if it's going to have any sort of impacts for decriminalizing it. So I would just really like to hear the impact on that. I would really like to hear from substance abuse professionals, of course, social justice organizations, since I know that is a big part of this bill, and why some of the future licenses are going to be going to more underserved areas, which would not likely be Downers Grove, just to hear about why that matters. I would love to hear from pediatricians or neurologists, folks who really understand the impact on the brain, especially the developing brain for young kids, as well as hopefully hear from some other levels of government, like the state, kind of a little bit more detail into the bill, kind of trying to drill down. I know we can read it, but as I'm sure anybody who has ever tried to read anything from a government official knows, it is really helpful sometimes to hear from the source, as well as the federal level. So I know that one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of long-term research on this topic is because of the way that it's scheduled. Was I think a Schedule I drug with regard to research. So federal dollars cannot be used to research the impacts of cannabis. So we kind of have to rely on organizations that get state funding or other countries funding that research. So I would also just kind of like to hear from that perspective of where we are on that front. Are things starting to change with the state? And is having these conversations going to move the mark in any meaningful way? So I'd like to be able to participate in some of those bigger conversations before making any sort of a decision.
Others? Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. You can put me in the option B camp as well. I think we need more information so that we can make a better informed decision ultimately down the road, realizing that all of our options are still open to us with regard to whether to prohibit or not in the future. I think the more information we've got, the better. Thanks, Mayor.
Cole?
I am also in option B. I think we have a lot of unanswered questions, and I've never been one to, when there are unanswered questions, just go ahead and make a decision without more information. I think many of the questions we will need answered are how many will we have or allow, where will they be zoned, how easy will it be to obtain money from the state. I think we're all aware of how our state functions. And so I have some concern about how the money is actually going to get to us, how they're going to calculate what we receive up to that 3%. I think many of us have already heard some residential feedback via email or just through talking with our neighbors. Some of the things that I've heard are, we don't want them near residential areas. We don't want them near schools. I'm a high school educator. I completely understand that. This is something that I deal with students every day. So I know that all of us up here will be considerate of those things as well. Someone's going to need to take the time to really craft these parameters. So this is not something, I mean, if you know, when you saw the schedule earlier, this is not something that's going to happen quickly. I hope that we continue to get public engagement, because I want to hear what our residents want. This is our village. We need to make this decision together. I would like to think about, I'm going to throw out an area, so I'm just thinking about areas that maybe this might work. If we don't want it near residential or school, we might want to consider the I-88 corridor, going north near Butterfield, somewhere in that region. That's just something that I've been thinking about. But again, really it's going to help us. This is going to be another one of those, I think, very emotionally charged issues, and the more resident feedback we have, the better it helps us to make a decision that's best for the community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to,
Kavanaugh?
Mayor, if I could chime in a little bit.
Absolutely.
I think it's, good evening, everyone. I think we're all in this space of trying to wrap our head around an industry that I'm personally not familiar with, but we've seen this evolution of this vertical go from criminalization to medicinal to commercial, and now we're at this new place of recreation. And I as much as my business background has helped me in other areas, I feel as if I'm
with everyone else of just really trying to wrap my head around what this new industry means. Cranes put out a number that a particular facility could generate $20 million and could, based on the tax numbers, equate to something in the realm of $500,000 or so for municipalities. But what are all these numbers? 70,000 medicinal users, 700,000 current users, and then this number of 21 and over that it becomes open to is something like 8.6 million. And so all those numbers they're what they are. I think what I'm more interested in as we look to wrap our head around this is really what the community thinks. I could sit up here and spout out numbers and stats all day, but I am in the camp of option B of just really wanting to hear the feedback of the people that live, work, and play in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I'd like to see this more fact-based. There's a lot of hyperbole about it. You know, I've read things where people say, well, it's not addictive, it's not a gateway drug. And I know for a fact, in looking at the studies, that 9% of people do get physically addicted to marijuana and 17% of people in their teens. I also have read studies that talk about the cognitive behavior. I guess the concerns that I would like to see published on this as well is as soon as you put the stamp of approval of the village, teenagers are going to pressure their parents to have their older siblings go buy it for them or their parents, because if Downers Grove says it's legal, it must be perfectly safe. Well, that would be pretty much the same as saying alcohol is perfectly safe. Well, we know it's not. Alcohol is legal, but it causes a lot of harm. There's a lot of alcoholics, there's a lot of drunk driving accidents, driving while intoxicated, families are wrecked by it. Cigarettes are legal, but there's also damage that comes from that. So I think we need to quantify it. I think we need to have that fact base. I'd like to see that dialogue come out so people will understand these things and not base it just on the things that they're reading in social media. I'm also intrigued by what other municipalities have done so far. I believe Naperville has said no. Do we have any other communities that have already weighed in?
We can get that information for you shortly, but many of the DuPage communities are having the conversation on the same timeline as we are.
Right. And you know, the other input I get from people is we're going to do it anyway. And if Downers Grove says no and Lombard says yes, then people are going to have to drive 7 miles instead of 5 miles. And then that's tax revenue. And then I'd like to see how big this balloon is, what kind of revenue we're talking about. Is if it's $100,000 worth of revenue and it costs us $125,000 to manage the problem, that I don't see as a positive thing. So that's my opinion on it.
What I thought I heard was a lot of people saying option B is the course forward. That is also, I agree with that. I'm glad to hear everybody chiming in with a lot of questions, because in sort of vintage Downers Grove form, whether it's facilities or stormwater utilities or liquor license adjustments or zoning, your village council works pretty hard at trying to get a full understanding of the issue before they make a decision. And that's what it sounds like everybody wants to do, and I'm glad for that. We'll hopefully move down that direction and learn a lot more, and hopefully through learning, feel like we're in a spot to make a good decision on behalf of the village. Is there anybody from the audience that'd like to speak on this subject? If so, please approach the podium, give us your name, and tell us what's on your mind.
Good evening. My name's Diane, and I live in Downers Grove. I've been here about 2 years. And I come from a marketing background, and also I know personally 2 people who have 2 children, 1 child each family, who have suffered severely from this marijuana, from 19 years of age to 25, who's been in rehab, a sober house, to correct this problem as well as others, and they are all fully addicted. And I'm not saying that that will happen to every individual, but thank you, Rich, for bringing that up, because it is a problem for the younger folks especially. I think you should also consider how this affects the police department. I currently live in a residence where I have lived almost 2 years in town, and there is someone in my building. There's several units to my building, and I get woke up almost every night from someone smoking marijuana, and my landlord does nothing about it. I've called the police, and I have to live with that all the time. How someone chooses to live their life, that's their decision, but when it affects me negatively and my physical being, I don't think that that's fair. So I think you should consider not only it as a business, as a revenue generator, what is the rest of the universe doing about this, but think about consequences of the individuals who really, we can't do anything about it. So also, I've been walking a lot in the downtown area, and there are businesses where I can see a cook sitting outside in the middle of the day, smoking marijuana, with children walking by. This is happening now, and also in another public place during the day. So it's already here. I don't know if you realize this, but I see it often. Also, I recently went to a graduation in Denver. Denver has been an advocate of this for a while. And I will tell you, the entire time that I was in Denver, multiple areas of the city, that's all you smelled in town. There are billboards that say it's not okay to smoke marijuana in public. They have become large advertising billboard campaigns to try to correct a problem that they have. I suggest, if you really want to see how a town is dealing with this, go there physically, fly there and see what it's like, because the whole time I was there, I was sick to my stomach. I also think that you bring up another valid point, several people, about the children in the area. How are they going to address that with their parents? And I understand completely for people that need this for a medicinal purpose. They have a reason, they have a need, but I think people have to be mindful, and when you get in that state, which I've never been and never choose to, how do you think? Can you think well? Can you act well? Can you walk well after you've had whatever quantity it is? Can you drive? Like, how is this going to affect the police department? When I call now, at all hours of the day and night, for them to come and write a case where I live, he's like, there's nothing I can do. It's up to your landlord. And the landlord's like, well, I have, tenant rights. So you're kind of between a fine line here. And I just wanted to share this evening for conversation, because it could be not just me, of course, that's enduring this. There might be other people. But if you really want community feedback, SurveyMonkey is a great tool. It's simple, it's quick, it's easy. Go on Patch, the local Patch for Downers Grove, put something in the newspaper, and really get that community feedback and really evaluate it. I know you have a timeline, but those are just some suggestions and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Rebello. I live in Downers Grove for 2 years now. There's a study here, a report available, rmhidta.org, prepared by the Rocky Mountain HIDTA Strategic Intelligence Unit. Have you ever seen that? The executive summary, this is from Colorado. So if we want to see what's coming near us, we just need to read their report. And it gets worse and worse as the years go on. High level, just give you a high level. Since recreational marijuana was legalized, we're talking about traffic fatalities. Marijuana-related traffic deaths increased 151%, while all Colorado traffic deaths increased 35%. This is equivalent to one person being killed every 2.5 days, compared to one person killed every 6.5 days. And marijuana use, 45% increase in just 1 month, let's see here. Colorado past month marijuana use for ages 12 and older is ranked 3rd in the nation, 85% higher than the national average. So in states where marijuana is illegal, marijuana use is dropping. Where states where marijuana is legal, marijuana use, of course, is going up. Why should we be surprised? The yearly rate of emergency department visits is increased 52% after the legalization of recreational marijuana. Black market marijuana, Colorado, 239 felony arrests, etc. And they keep seizing more and more marijuana. Societal impact. Marijuana tax revenue represents 0.9%. So less than 1% they're getting in marijuana. But violent crimes have increased 18.6%. Property crime increased 8.3%. This is all since it's been commercially available or legalized. 65% of local jurisdictions in Colorado, 65%, have banned medical and recreational marijuana businesses. They banned it because they see that this is terrible for their community. Marijuana sales, the tax revenue never sufficiently covers the costs associated with the negative impact it creates in our community. Also, they pay with cash a lot of times. So they're going to walk in with a wad of cash, come out with a wad of drugs, which is, does that only kind of attract crime? And the pot shop next door, that's kind of, doesn't really make me and my family want to come by, walk down there and smell all the pot or see all that paraphernalia and have my 5 kids say, "What's that, Mom? Can we go in there?" I mean, we had some people that were standing on we live in a $500,000 house. People were standing on our corner, smoking marijuana in their 20s, 30s. Smoking marijuana, we saw them arrive. We could hear them because the windows were open, talking about what they were going to do, what they'd already done, which is beat up someone. And then they had marijuana, and they got high while they were standing there. And then, so we decided we'd call the non-emergency number. The police came, which was very brilliant, the way they did this, with the lights on them from 3 different ways at the very end. They didn't turn them on until the end. I thought that was good. But anyway, when they got to the guys, they were talking to them, and so they said, "What do you have in your backpack?" And the guy said, "Oh, just a few things I grabbed on the way out, a machete and some knives." And the police backed up, like, whoa. And they were planning, I could hear them talking while high, to go to the 7-Eleven near my house and beat up somebody. So they were taken away. In June 2017, there were 491 retail marijuana stores in the state of Colorado, compared to 392 Starbucks and 208 McDonald's. So I just want to urge you to, I know I came late to the meeting, so I think you were debating between Plan A and B, and I guess I would say A, only because, what good can come out of marijuana? Medically, if there's a medical thing, keep it in the hospitals, whatever. Why do we want to do something bad? Just ask ourselves, what good can come out of smoking marijuana? And if so, then why are we doing it? Why don't we just say, hey, the new fad is sleeping pills. If we can get a tax revenue, let's do that. We got to just have a line here and say it's wrong, it's bad, I don't see any good coming out of it, so I just urge option A. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Jeff Horvath, Downers Grove. Well, thanks for the opportunity to come and talk on this very important issue. And I want to make really clear what the issue is. The issue is not whether or not marijuana should be legal in the state of Illinois. That's a fact, it is. That's passed into law. So that should not be a conversation at all for this village council. And it's a worthless conversation at this point, I believe, for the residents as well. The issue at hand is very simple. Does Downers Grove want to be a municipality that allows for the sale, the retail sale, or the wholesale growing of recreational use marijuana? And with all due respect, Commissioner Earl, it's a totally different issue than medical, as you know. Medical was required. We had no choice in the matter, so be it. Fortunately, in my opinion, no dispensaries for medical have chosen to sit in Downers Grove. The likelihood of the recreational companies becoming prevalent in an area will be tied to, initially, those providing for the medical, because they already have it. This is big business. This is what this is. Now, the state of Illinois was smart, in my opinion. They put the hooks in to allow for taxation not only at the municipal level, but also at the county level, so the county can place on taxes. So you're looking at that one chart that the state could tax as high as 25%. The county can tax as high as 3%, 3.75 I believe it is, and the municipality can tax as high as 3%. That's a pretty good tax amount, if you will, for the purchaser to see and say, oh, that's a lot of taxes. Maybe I'll go to my other distributor. Now, what's that other distributor? That's the black market, the illegal market. That's not going to go away. So we're going to have to wrestle with this. Just because we're legalizing recreational marijuana does not mean the illegal way to get it is going to go away. Now, a couple things that I think are important. And I do appreciate the quest for facts, and especially I definitely recommend you get very quickly conversations with those at facilities like Lindenhurst, the behavioral director there, people who are seeing addictions, dealing with addictions. It's a known fact that marijuana is an addicting drug. That's been proven scientifically. There should be no debate about that. Now, whether people want to use it or not, that's a different story. I'm not here to discuss that. So it is an addictive drug. Does Downers Grove want to allow for the sale of an addictive drug in Downers Grove? We already have alcohol, and we know that alcohol can be addictive. So the question you have to debate is, do you want to allow for another avenue? If we provide for the retail sale and want those businesses in the village of Downers Grove, we will be therefore increasing the amount of access. I think once we increase access, it's very likely, and studies have shown, usage increases. Increase access in Downers Grove, usage in Downers Grove will increase. You will also have a broader base of usage. Yes, you will attract, as other communities say no around us, if we were to say yes, sure, we'll attract some of that business. But the question is, do you want that business? Is that business we want to have in the village of Downers Grove? I love Downers Grove, raised my family in Downers Grove. I think it's a family-friendly community. I would love it to remain that way. I don't think I need to have, or desire to have, the marijuana sales and all the problems that will cause after that in terms of intoxication, people wandering, the traffic violations that will likely occur after that. Are you aware that the state provision also allows for the consideration of smoking in the establishments? So not unlike the microbreweries that we have where you could have a beer, well, you'll have to deal with the possibility that they'll want to allow smoking. Law enforcement. So the 8% of funding, there are several funds. I think there's 4 funds that this act is creating in the state of Illinois. 8% of the general fund. This is after all of the costs of the program, which the state has no clue it's going to cost. Studies from other states have shown that for every $1 in revenue, over $4.50 in cost has been put out. So I'm not sure how one actually makes money on this, except for the growers. Law enforcement will have no way to measure the intoxication level. Now, there is a standard set. I can't quite cite it. I'm not quite sure. It's nanograms of THC in the bloodstream or something like this. I don't know how you measure that. You have to take a blood test. Well, the police don't administer blood tests, and I don't think they'll be doing that on the scene for quite some time. So what do? You have to go get someone who's professionally allowed to do a blood test. THC levels will drop fairly quickly over time. They drop, in fact, faster than the level of THC in the brain. So just because someone may appear from the test that's available, the blood test, that they are within legal limits, that doesn't mean they're behaving in a normal manner. So again, I just want to summarize. I think the issue here is really one of, what does Downers Grove want to be known as? There's not enough money to be had in taxes here, in my opinion. And is any amount of money worth the trade-off for the impact it would have on the kids, the high schoolers who are already citing that they're smoking marijuana earlier? The junior hires have increased in their use of marijuana, and it just trickles down. Once that hits the home, there's your access, just like it is for the alcohol. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, any further council comments or questions? Okay, Dave, think you got direction on
I
that?
suspect we will start talking about this very soon, maybe as soon as the first meeting in September, which is our next regularly scheduled meeting. That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to council member reports. Kavanaugh, let's start with you. Anything for the group tonight?
No reports this week, Mayor.
Marge?
Yes, I have a report, Mayor. Friends of the Edwards House is presenting the Downers Grove Landmarked House Tour. That will be Saturday, September 14th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. 4 beautiful landmarked homes will be open for viewing. And there's specifically was highlighted to me the Orange Lyman House, which they think may be one of the oldest houses in Downers Grove. It was built, they believe, in the late 1830s. Also the Gorham Dum House, the Bungee House, and the Foot House. You can pre-purchase your tickets at the eventbrite.com or at www.friendsoftheedwardshouse.com. Tickets are $15 per person in advance and $20 per person at the door. This is, I believe, the second time, maybe the third they've held this event. It always sells out, so get your tickets now. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Rich?
No report, Mayor.
Leslie?
I actually do have something to say. So I just want to remind everyone that the Education Foundation of Downers Grove, District 58, is having their annual Oktoberfest on September 13th and 14th. It's $10 for adults, free for kids 13 and under, and $5 for teens 14 and over. So check out 58foundation.org/Oktoberfest if you want more information.
Thank you. Nicole?
Yes, I have a report, Mayor. Shocker. Just a reminder, the rescheduled Barbecue Bolt is taking place on Saturday, September 7th. It is a 8 a.m. start, and then there's a post-race picnic in the park and barbecue and kids' activities and lots of fun things. You are still before the September 5th deadline if you register, so the price is a little bit cheaper. Go to dgparks.org/BBQBolt. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I have no report this evening. What we're going to do now is take a 5-minute break. We will reconvene right around the corner in the committee room, where we'll pick up again with the long-range plan. One of the subjects tonight is downtown, future of the downtown. So 5 minutes, next door. Thank you. We'll get started back up again. We're going to have a conversation tonight, part of our planning process, talking about the future of the downtown. It obviously plays a big role in the future of the village, and we need to be planning for things. So Mr. Baker is going to go through some thoughts to get us started, and we'll talk about some of the plans that we've already discussed briefly, but kind of go through a little bit more tonight, maybe with some additional detail and opportunity for questions from the council as well as from our audience.
So I hate to disappoint you. For those waiting for Mr. Baker to speak, I am going to start us off a little bit. But the same person who brought you this great handwriting is going to deliver one of the best presentations you've ever heard of the downtown. That's my handwriting, so you see where I rank here. Just a couple of notes on long-range planning. Long-range plan really has 4 components. This is a document that establishes the village's strategic goals over a multiple-year period. helps us to identify the issues that will affect the future of our village, and then takes the next steps at creating general strategies and solutions to address those issues with an eye towards sustainability. And then the fourth component of our long-range plan is our 2-year work plan, the work plan that this council establishes for us. We also refer to it as priority action items. The long-range planning process is a great opportunity to have dialogue among council members, including staff, and members of the community. And we're so happy to have so many members of the public here tonight to participate in long-range planning. The long-range planning process takes place over a couple-month period with at least 6 meetings. Our first meeting was last village council meeting, where we spent some time talking about our strategic goals. We'll have at least 5 more meetings. Meeting number 2, which is happening tonight, has 2 topics. One of them was recreational marijuana, and we got good planning level direction on that, and we will be headlong into that priority action item, starting probably at the next council meeting. Also on the agenda for long-range planning tonight is a discussion of the future of the downtown. You can see that we have a few more topics. Facilities will come up in meeting number 3. Stormwater capital planning will come up at a future meeting. And then to close out the last 2 meetings, we will talk about our priority action items of this council. I think we'll have to go back and have another discussion about our strategic goals. And that'll take us through, we'll be into October or so by the time we get done with this year's long-range plan. So that's the background, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Deputy Village Manager, Mike Baker, who will talk about the future of the downtown. Mike?
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everybody. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide an update of this project to the council and those in attendance, allow for questions and discussion. This is a very similar presentation for those who were in attendance at the Downtown Management Board meeting earlier this month. Thought it would be beneficial for the council to hear as well, to understand where we're at. The presentation is really going to touch on 3 broad areas. I'll summarize the issue that we're trying to address with this project, the process that we've gone through from a historical perspective and where we're headed, and then a summary of the plan as it's being proposed with a focus on the financial elements of that plan. So the issue that we're being confronted with is that a lot of the tools and mechanisms that were put in place to assist revitalization of the downtown back in the late 1990s are nearing their conclusion, coming to an expiration. The tax increment financing district that funded a lot of the public improvements, parking garage construction, and facilitated redevelopment. The special service area, which exists primarily as a funding mechanism for the Downtown Management Corporation, but also provides additional revenue in the to the TIF district. And also the operating agreement that the village maintains with that organization, with the Downtown Management Corporation, which is an independent nonprofit organization that the village has an operating agreement with. So all 3 of those set to expire in December of 2020. From a practical standpoint, what that means is that 2021 is the final year during which taxes will be paid from those existing arrangements. It's also the final year in which the village makes its bond payment, makes the final bond payment for bonds that were issued for a lot of those public improvements that I mentioned earlier. So we have these expiring, and we have ongoing expenses with insufficient revenues to support them without some type of action being taken to establish new revenue sources or dedicate revenue to support ongoing expenses. So what we've done, going back to May of 2017, is undertake a process that really involves quite a bit of engagement. This issue was identified in a previous long-range plan. Shortly after that, we formed, in partnership with the Downtown Management Corporation, a committee, the Future of the Downtown Ad Hoc Committee, that included a diverse group of stakeholders, some of whom are in the audience tonight, residents, commercial property owners, residents from the village at large, who had an opportunity to weigh in on a variety of topics and themes related to future downtown funding. In September of 2018, a plan was presented to the village council that was at more of a general level, about a 20,000-foot level of perspective. And since then, we've really narrowed down, gotten more specific. It's important to note that between September of 2018 and April of 2019, the Downtown Management Corporation and its board went through a pretty substantial transition. First of all, in board makeup, with residents joining that board for the first time, and then the organization also went through a revision of its bylaws, spending time really looking at the structure and the way that that organization's bylaws were drafted. And here we are in August of 2019, presenting a more detailed level plan to the council, and continuing that communication with downtown management, and as you'll see, also engagement to a broader audience as well. And that's where we'll really head from this point over the next couple of months. September and October begin and really continue the outreach efforts and engagement with homeowners associations, with the business and property owner community, to make sure that there's understanding and an opportunity to provide input as we get closer to making final decisions. It's also important to note that during this time frame, we'll be receiving some information that's going to be very useful as we make future decisions. A parking study, which many of you I think are aware of and had an opportunity to participate in back in early June, is nearing completion. And the downtown management initiated a landscaping plan, went through the process of selecting a qualified architect, a landscape architect. We've had involvement with that group in that providing comment on that plan. It is expected to be delivered in the coming weeks. So that information will be extremely helpful as we go forward. We'll take the input, the information we receive from these planning tools, make adjustments to the plan, and ultimately, and also consider revisions to the operating agreement with the Downtown Management Corporation. So those actions will play out in the coming months, with a goal ultimately towards, by the third quarter of 2020, having the final plan adopted with all action taken so that we have a plan in place, ready to be implemented before we hit the December 2020 date of expiration. So that really represents the process that we've gone through and will continue to unfold. The plan that was put forward for comment and consideration really includes three key components from a financing standpoint. The first component includes paying for existing services. These are services within the downtown with existing village funding sources. Currently, that amounts to about $600,000 a year that comes from general sources of funding, either in the general fund or the capital projects fund. The idea is to sustain or maintain that funding source going forward. Secondly, we will dedicate parking fund revenue that comes from users of the parking system, primarily commuters. Dedicate that source of revenue that's currently supporting bond payments, and remember those expire, or those will be fully paid off in 2021. Dedicate that revenue source to parking deck maintenance. It's a facility that's about 15 years old, and as it's aged, has incurred increasing costs related to its maintenance and upkeep. And thirdly, the plan proposes the creation of a new special service area. And this is a special service area where the Downtown Management Corporation and the village will work together in a collaborative manner to determine services to be provided and the amount to be collected up to a maximum rate. The plan initially calls for a rate of no more than 0.75% of assessed value of property. Currently, the special service area rate that's in place right now is set at 1.5%, so this would be a reduction from 1.5% to 0.75%, and 0.75% applied to the existing properties within the special service area boundaries is anticipated to generate about $600,000 a year. Again, so that plan, initial plan, did assume existing boundaries of the special service area. We've also laid out a scenario, referred to here as Scenario 1, for the use of that $600,000. And at this point, it's broad categories. Certainly, that will get further defined as we get more of this information. But for now, the categories as defined include parking system improvements of about $200,000, improvements to landscaping and cleanup in the downtown, $100,000, and funding for the Downtown Management Corporation of $300,000. I put some information on the lower right-hand side of the board to indicate what the impact would be to an average residential and commercial property based on that change of rate from 1.5% to 0.75%. This is based only on 2018 tax rates. I didn't make any assumptions about how tax rates will adjust going forward. But just simply that reduction from 1.5% to 0.75% represents about a 10.2% drop in the total tax bill. So an average residential property tax bill of $8,000 drops by $818. A commercial property tax bill drops by $1,226. So you can see the information there. And then this graph is just meant to illustrate visually the components that I've walked through here, where you have the $600,000 that's maintained, the parking fund revenue of $300,000 that gets shifted to support parking deck maintenance. And right now, this is the component that the existing rate generates, or in 2021 would generate approximately $1.2 million at a 0.75% rate. That essentially gets cut in half, and you can see it reflected here, and supports the those categories of expenses that I described. I will tell you that some of the we've had opportunities in that downtown management conversation, and in a conversation I had last night with a number of homeowners association presidents and other board representatives. We have started getting some feedback from that group. Some of the initial comments that we've heard quite consistently suggest, first of all, a need for a better understanding of how these dollars translate into value, into services and other aspects of downtown investment that are beneficial to the property owners in the downtown. Also, we heard themes and comments about opportunities and exploring opportunities to lower that rate, looking at something perhaps more along the lines of 0.5% as opposed to 0.75 or something lower. And also, on the question of the boundaries, we've heard interest in sort of exploring the idea of expanded boundaries potentially from the standpoint of fairness and equity compared to people who are in the SSA boundaries versus those that may be benefiting but outside of existing boundaries. So we'll continue, obviously, to gather that input and feedback, but also want to provide that opportunity this evening. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
If I could, Mayor, just we said it when we started this long-range planning process that after each staff presentation, we would formulate the discussion question for the council. This is a unique one because this is a project that spans multiple years and multiple councils, and we're literally right in the middle of it. Mike he just told us he was meeting engagement meetings last night, excuse me. So the question is, do you have any change in policy direction of this plan at this point, recognizing that we're in the middle of the process and we're gathering feedback on this plan? And are we generally okay with the engagement process that we're using? And that, to us, frankly, is the most important part, and that engagement process is the one that Mike just described, continuing to work with homeowners associations, continuing to work with downtown management, and then moving to council meetings. So those are the policy questions.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mike. So some of this is stuff we've seen before. Some of us have seen it 2 or 3 times. And to Dave's point, I guess we need to sort of do a check-in here as we go through the process. So let's start with the council. Are there any comments or questions? Is anybody want to weigh in, Mark?
Yeah, I'll go. I am glad to see the rate going down. I think that's been the biggest burden to the folks who are in this SSA, I'm sorry. The misunderstanding maybe when they bought as to how that 1.5% was going to actually affect their tax bills, and the actual burden that they've been having to live with, which is significant. And so I'm glad to see this coming down, and I have been in support of this, and I continue to be in support of this. So I think it's going very well, and I'm interested to hear what our guests have to say.
Thank you. Rich?
I'm intrigued by what services people get who live in the neighborhood that we call downtown versus El Sierra or, Orchard Brook. What services are they receiving from the village that normal residents wouldn't get that they're being charged for? And what other value, intrinsic value, for instance, do their guests get to use the parking garage if they stay overnight?
So the services are mainly here in this area right now. They're covered by general fund expenses. They include things like snow plowing of the sidewalks within the downtown area, landscaping of the downtown, and public property. Let's see.
Public property maintenance, right?
Public property maintenance. There's an enhanced, just because of the unique sort of configuration of streets in the downtown, we provide a higher level of service related to snow removal compared to how we plow snow in residential neighborhoods. So those really represent some of the areas where the services are distinct in the downtown compared to other areas.
I'd like to add in there the services provided by downtown management, which are also funded by these revenue sources, which include marketing for the downtown in general, the operation of events designed to further the economic impact in our downtown, business attraction and retention, and public engagement and representation efforts that are provided by downtown management.
So would you say those are the things that lead to higher property values in downtown because of those improvements?
Yes, I think so. I think those services relate directly to the environment, and that's the role of the assessor. But certainly downtown has quite a different feel, and I think it's on a per square foot basis, higher property values than other similar areas.
Anyone?
The board talk first, or can I ask a question? Or
We're going to make a pass through here,
Okay.
and then we'll go do some back and forth.
Perfect.
Make a pass through here first. Any one parcel in any spot in town, what exactly affects its property value is a little hard to quantify in small pieces, but certainly the downtown has a certain environment that seems to be attractive, and a lot of that has to do with the public work that's done in public areas. That's different than, for instance, El Sierra.
Okay.
Kevin?
Mike, I had a quick question. Thanks for taking something that has a bunch of different tentacles and making it really plain. The parking system improvement, just because I'm kind of coming in the middle, what's that category, what's that silo, and how does that
Yeah,
work?
so it refers to a broad category right now that will become clearer in the coming weeks,
Okay.
because we're nearing the wrap-up of the parking study that was, the consultant is analyzing
Okay, so
the information.
it's related to the study that's going, okay.
When we get that study, it'll include recommendations that have varying degrees of time frame for implementation and varying degrees of cost, and we'll have to go through and make decisions about how to prioritize and ultimately fund improvements to the parking system, and that just refers to, and provides an opportunity to further those initiatives.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor. A question and then a comment. Mike, where do we stand on the engagement efforts? How deep into them are we, and how many more do you have to go?
Yeah, at this point, we had a meeting with Homeowners Association presidents. I was joined by Aaron Venezia, the Executive Director of Downtown Management Corporation, and Phil Stromberg, President of that organization. That was just last night. From there, we had intended to more broadly reach out to the homeowners associations and through downtown management, the property owners and business owners, which have groups established within that organization. So those are the types of engagement efforts that are yet to come. And obviously, we want to make sure that the information we're providing them was useful and informative.
Also, the Downtown Management Board has been briefed with this presentation as well.
And understanding that we're still working our way through that engagement, I'm in full support of moving forward with the current structure. Like Commissioner Earl mentioned, we're seeing a significant reduction in the proposed SSA amount. And I think the rest of the plan reflects a good division, an equitable division between the value that downtown residents derive from these services and also, excuse me, the value that the entire village derives from the downtown and the services that are provided. Certainly, we all benefit from the tremendous downtown area that we have, the businesses that are there, and the residents who occupy those residences and patronize the businesses. Simply put, the downtown is the heart of our village, and we have to maintain it. And I think this is a good structure for continuing to move forward with that. Thank you.
Leslie?
Yeah, with regard to that, I just have one question. So I know that this is purely in hypothetical at this point, but if there were to be a lower rate than what was projected here, do you anticipate that some services would potentially drop? Would you see a reduction in what we're used to? Would you see a drop in what we might be able to do with downtown management? What are some of the impacts you might anticipate if that happened?
That's a good question, and that's part of the exercise that we're going through with downtown management to fine-tune, based on the amount available, how those dollars are going to be spent, and what's the most sort of effective and best use of the limited resources available, whatever that amount is. So at this point, I think a little difficult to say exactly where some of those impacts might be felt, but certainly it would force a higher level of prioritization.
Gotcha. So you think it would, this projection, do you think would be kind of like maintaining where we're at now? Is that
It actually is.
Or would it be increasing a little bit?
Yeah, it's actually, so downtown management currently receives $240,000.
Yeah.
So there's a slight increase there.
Okay.
These dollars represent enhancements to funding and investment in the downtown that currently do not exist. So it offers opportunity.
Thank you.
Mike did a great job with that visual, because right now, on the left-hand side of that little chart, all that money goes to the TIF and debt service, and that will all go away. Items 1 and 2 are what's really servicing the downtown right now. And you can see in this plan, it goes from about 900,000 to I think about 1.5 or so. So there'd be a significant increase. If you wanted to dial this back to maintain the exact same level of service, you would just pick a rate that exactly matches columns 1 and 2.
What's the rationale on extending the boundaries? To broaden the base or allow more people to get service?
Well, it has that effect. I think what I've heard is that there's a sort of an equity and fairness argument in the sense that the properties that are just outside of that boundaries but still in very close proximity to the downtown are benefiting from, but not necessarily paying the costs of those services.
I just have a quick question, and I don't know if this can even be answered tonight or if it makes sense to answer tonight, but is the role of downtown management going to change or stay the same? Or do we know?
The review of the operating agreement provides an opportunity to look at the functions of downtown management and make sure that it serves the interests of the village and the downtown community going forward.
Okay.
So And obviously, the downtown looks quite a bit different now than it did back in the early 90s when that organization was first established. And that's part of the process that the review of the operating agreement will allow us to sort of examine what that role really should be.
Great.
So as this sits, we're still have to do some work on defining the value of those three items. Those need a lot of additional work.
Yes.
But as it sits right now, it amounts to whatever the total number is, $1.5 million of annual expenditure downtown, of which about $900,000 is paid outside of downtown-specific property taxes, right? That's the way that breaks down, so it's 60/40, something like that, 65/35. Those average tax bill examples, those first line on there, those are actual total tax bill, correct?
Correct.
Not village-only component.
Correct.
So the village-only component, if this reduction were to go into place, we talk a lot about 9% being a typical component, so the guy that's paying $10,000 tax bill is paying $900 to the village. What does that look like even with a 0.75 SSA? Not to use your $8,000 tax bill, how much is going to the village?
The village would be collecting, you'd have to sort of net out the SSA portion, and then the village portion would be about that 9% of the difference. So if it were netted out, it'd be probably about $600 on the average residential.
So what I think would be interesting, and not for tonight necessarily, but for me, as I understand the impacts, would be to, what is the village component differential?
Sure.
Because that's a question about, to Rich's point about value, and as we get these things defined, how we think value is going to be defined. It's important to realize that still, the majority of that bill is still not going to the village, and we're looking at 65 or more percent of all this activity still being paid by general village revenues. Just a perspective on it. It's not like it's all coming right now through SSA receipts. The engagement processes you talked about, do we have any sense of when we think those values are going to be sufficiently defined that we'd get more information to Leslie's point, I think primarily when would we get some further definition? Is there a timetable on that?
Yeah, I would expect to be able to provide the definitive information toward the later part of this year, probably in the November timeframe to council.
Okay. So, Rich, go ahead.
How much more does it cost to maintain the parking deck than we receive in revenue?
I can get you some information about that. We had some work done to assess the maintenance cost of the deck a few years ago. We have a report that details what those costs are.
And do we know the useful life of that garage?
50 years,
50?
hopefully longer if it's properly maintained. And Mike said, we just got that maintenance plan done a couple years ago. The general answer to that was we were a little bit shy of the proper maintenance number a handful of years ago. In the last 2 to 3 years, we put in the recommended level. Moving forward, that $300,000 a year is tied to the recommendations in that multi-year maintenance plan.
Thank you.
Let's open it up to the audience here. We could, a lot of hands jumping up, so what I'd like to do is just work around this way. So you sat in the right chair.
I did.
Just tell us your name and tell us what your question is or your comment is.
I'm Maureen Grove. We've been in Downers Grove for 35 years. Matter of fact, I was on the original Total Community Development Program 25 years ago when we were designing all of this. So I'm well aware of BSSA and how things came to be. But what I think you guys have missed the boat on is that an SSA and a TIF really have a limited life, right? So when all the infrastructure was done, all of those costs should have rolled off. As you're saying, the debt service is going away, but there's continuing to be this maintenance of the debt. The asset after the bond has been paid for reverts to the city, right? It belongs to the city of Downers Grove, which makes it in my opinion, should be general operating funds that pay for the maintenance of the parking deck. If you need to raise your revenues for parking to cover the maintenance of the parking deck, then that should be part of the solution. And I don't understand how you get to $600,000 in both maintenance and like labor costs to carry on an SSA for, I don't know how many more years, you know, you're thinking about doing it, but the purpose of an SSA and a TIF really is for infrastructure, and what you got is repairs and services, like labor costs. So I'm having a hard time digesting why we're even talking about lowering the rate, where the rate should be, the rate should have gone to zero at the end of the SSA. So, and we just have a small little condo in downtown Downers. We didn't really understand that it was even in the bill, but then when we came to understand it, I was like, I'm in commercial real estate, I've been involved in TIFs before in some SSAs in other communities, and so I was happy to see or learn from Bill that it was rolling off at some point, and so I was befuddled by why there's still this talk about what the rate's going to be going forward. But it seems to me like what I'm hearing is that it's really for maintenance, which should come out of the city of Downers Grove's operating account. I mean, I don't know.
Couple of things about that. It'd be great if we could keep the dialogue going instead of the applause or the boos.
Oh, yeah, no, and I would talk to anyone here. I don't know anyone, I mean, I don't even really know,
Those are good questions. Well, a couple things about that. One is SSAs exist elsewhere in town as well, in perpetuity, because we have several places where maintenance services provided by the village are higher than a typical neighborhood would be. And there's, I don't know how many of them there are, 6 or so, I think, around town, and the one that comes to my mind, I think there's one associated with Prince Pond. There are areas in town where
the floodings occurred, generally.
No, just where, so take Prince Pond, I'm probably getting over my skis, but there's a pond there that the village essentially maintains, the landscape around, the maintenance of the pond itself, which doesn't just work on its own, and we assess houses in an area or surrounding that pond additional for ongoing maintenance. In this presentation here, the parking garage, that second item up there, the maintenance of the parking garage, and that's the existing parking system is going to be paid by, in this plan, existing revenues from parking users.
Right.
That $200,000 parking improvement thing is a little bit of a placeholder, because we suspect that when we get the parking report back, there's going to be recommendations about new investment, about new things that need to be either added or maintained differently. So what we're talking about, to your point, is existing maintenance is going to be paid out of existing general funds. It's not SSA money to do existing parking maintenance. The SSA may or may not exist, but if it does, it's going to be paid for, used to pay for extraordinary, meaning compared to some other neighborhoods. Would you say? Sure. Compared to other neighborhoods, certain opportunities to maintain and provide services that are different and at a higher level than you would expect in a regular residential neighborhood. It's not that service on the garage.
Well, the only other thing is with the garage and the users that come, because I've been riding the train again for 30 years, why I bought in Downers Grove, and you're talking about values. For value, it's, yeah, the downtown looks great, but the value for me is the train station and, you know, transit-oriented development. So I appreciate how it looks. I think it's gorgeous, but I think when you're looking at real estate tax and appraisals, you're really looking at location, right? So when we as residents get taxed the same as the retail owners, right, in DuPage, and the retail owners, their value should be, you know, millions higher because they've got leases, and leases convert to cash flow, and cash flow pays the real estate taxes. So
that's sort of a separate question from us, though.
No, I understand, but we're here as, you know, I don't know, but I think we're mostly residents, and so the fact that we're getting taxed the exact same way as the businesses and the retail owners doesn't really make a lot of sense when the parking garage is the mainstay for all those businesses. Like every single business in the downtown area uses that parking garage, and as do the commuters. And they walk that, you know, the areas that you guys are maintaining, and I appreciate that, you know, that gets, you know, that we get additional services for. Those are your commuters walking from the parking garage to the train station. So it's got to be cleared by the village, because that is a street, you know, in my mind, that's a public street. I mean, it's used with, you know, massive, you know, flow of people. So what I think is unfair, and I'm sure that's what everybody's here, is that, you know, from a residential standpoint, it doesn't make sense that we bear the burden of a long-term bond to do additional improvements to the parking garage.
Yeah, I gotta not beat this to death, but at the same time, try and be really clear. There is not in this SSA any new debt bond service kind of stuff. Not as it's proposed right now. I don't know what might come out of it, but what's proposed right now is not the issuance of a new long-term bond to be serviced by just the downtown residents.
Just out of curiosity, when that parking garage was built, I thought it was built that it could have additional levels built onto it. Is that true?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer, but we can.
Well, I was just gonna say, you know, go up a few more levels and, you know, start selling spaces or whatever, you know, think you could buy a spot. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to get the residents off of the SSA. I think we just gotta think a little bit outside the box, and we're just kind of following what's been done historically, and I get it, but I think
Sure.
in a lot of ways it just doesn't make
All right,
sense.
we'll keep moving around. We're gonna go down the back and snake up to the front, and we're gonna.
Mayor, can I interject real quick?
Please.
Some of the discussion about property taxes and commercial businesses versus residences, I think could raise something that I think needs to be clarified, in that we can't tax the property of a retail business any differently than we tax a residence. So I think we have to be careful in terms of. Well, but that's a problem foisted on us by Springfield, yet again.
I know.
Thank you.
It's also a different valuation.
Completely.
Yes,
different
and that's, as the mayor said earlier, that's really
Not
an
a
issue
different
for
tax
the
rate, but a different
But the
method of
value should
valuation.
be higher than.
There's no, we could argue that all night long and debate it, but the issue that Greg's trying to underscore is that the law that says how taxes are going to be levied is set by state of Illinois. The assessor's office, again, not part of the village of Downers Grove, sets those valuations.
Right, but you guys put the SSA in place. Right?
To fund some extraordinary.
Understood.
extraordinary
And
services.
the developer
Correct.
who did the buildings that we all reside in had the benefit of the SSA and the TIF.
Let's move to the back row. We'll start here in the blue shirt.
Last time I checked, it was 2-2 in the second inning. Dave Nicholson. I've been here through 10 of the 20 years of the SSA and the TIF. And the need 20 years ago is different
Than it is today.
today than it was 20 years ago. And in fact, my wife participated in some of the ad hoc meetings last year. And it was in deep yogurt before, and it's not now, and all of that has changed well to the positive. But what concerns me about this plan, and I think needs council's debate and discussion and probably some learning, is it seems to assume that DMC is a necessary component of a brand-new SSA. The village's agreement with the DMC ends at the same time the SSA ends. It's a new world. In my humble opinion, what they do best is events and those kinds of things. Those kinds of things potentially could be absorbed elsewhere. There are other entities within the village and the township and stuff that promote business and things of that nature. But I think there's a piece of revenue that's earmarked for something that hasn't been thought through in terms of what's it going to look like? What's it actually going to do? I've heard talks about what I refer to as a cost transfer from the village to the DMC about landscaping, okay? So is that going to be part of a new DMC charter, and will they be held to all the landscaping needs, requirements, changes, all of that, and the village would be out of that? Would that be crystal clear or gray? It seems like a lot of work has to be done on a specific basis about what the DMC would do if it were to continue, not the assumption that the operating agreement will be revised. But the world is different now than it was 20 years ago, and the needs of the village are different. And if we have a DMC and we want events, cool. If we want the DMC to do things beyond events, okay, but let's be real specific about what they are and how they're funded and what that operating agreement says.
One of the
And
things
I
that-
think this is a big deal for you guys to wrestle with. They've been a big part of the community. The Tivoli was a huge part of that originally. And so there's some political implication, there are some others, but there's some, either way you go, you've got to figure out what it's going to look like.
Well, I think that's why I asked that question. That was my only question, essentially, was what is the role going to be of that organization? Is it going to stay or change? And I think, Mr. Baker did a good job of saying that's coming. So, but I do think that that's a very important aspect and something that we're all going to need to consider, that has a lot of layers as to what they currently do. Are we going to add things? Is it going to stay the same? What's it going to look like in the future? And I think based on the response I got earlier, that is coming, correct? Just to clarify, yeah. So, yeah.
It's got to be real specific and worked out, and I think the village manager last Tuesday in the same place did an excellent job of explaining how we need money. Okay, so I get that piece of it. I don't get how you're spending some of it and what they're going to do if you give them some of the money, meaning the DMC.
Yeah, I don't think any of this can get finalized until those value definitions are actually before us, which is still to come. You could find any one of those three items that make up that $600,000. We could all decide that we weren't happy with the definition of value. This is a plan to try and figure out if we believe something like this works. It's not a plan that's going to get settled today or even in the very real near future. Those value questions are still getting asked and answered by downtown management, by village team, and through meetings like this, through continuous input. Let's keep going through the back row and kind of snake around. Anybody else in the back row? Go ahead, please.
I'm not a gifted businessman like many of y'all. My name is Tracy Behart, and that .75, just bear with me. At one point, was that .5 already? In the information I saw when I moved in, that was going to go, the original target was .5, and that has now creeped up to .75?
It was 1.1.
It was 1.5. It was supposed to go down to .5. And now
There
it's
was some
0.75.
information that I believe you might be referring to the September 8, 2018 report that I do believe included a .5 figure for residential. And at the time, that was one of multiple revenue sources that we were considering. But .75 is by no means the final point that amount that's been settled on.
Okay, I had to wrap my head, because I knew I saw
You're
low
illustrating at this point that this is what .75 would look like.
Yes, exactly. .75 with the properties in the existing boundaries, and that's about $600,000.
And you can find, to your point, that as those value definitions get further defined, that number moves.
I just don't want it to go up again.
Sure. I just wanted to jump in here on point of clarity. This is the plan that is proposed right now for public input that Mike is going around with the public engagement. So this is not final, but it's not just for demonstration.
Yeah,
This is actually proposed. And we're going to get feedback from everybody tonight and the engagement process, report it all back to the council, and then the council gets to decide all these things. But right now, it is actually on the table as a proposal.
Go ahead.
She's totally correct with the SSA. Okay, it is actually, I feel, very unjust, okay? Every person that pays into the SSA at the 1.5 is paying 19% of their total tax bill is going to the SSA. Okay, everybody that pays that, okay, so that works out to every fifth year, you're paying a sixth year of property taxes. Every person that's in that SSA. Okay, so we're talking about taking care of the garage and taking care of this other thing. I think we gotta sort of justify what's being done. Some people say, oh, your assessed value goes up because of the downtown. Therefore, you should pay 20% more in taxes for the downtown. I mean, if we had a list and something told me that what we're paying for the management group or what for the landscaping and snow plowing and stuff, and we had some sort of idea that's more than I paid for. I've been paying taxes in Downers Grove on homes since 71, okay, 1971, okay, and Orchard Brook, you mentioned earlier, in Orchard Brook, when they put in the curbs and gutters, okay, that increased my value of my home in Orchard Brook when they put the curbs and gutters and the sewer in there and things like that, and they took care of the drainage problems over there. But that's a benefit to everybody in Downers Grove. So with the money that the SSA is given towards the management group, towards landscaping and stuff like that, wait, there's something wrong here. Why isn't everybody in the village sharing in that cost? Okay, now, like when she said we put for the infrastructure, when our building went in and the garage and everything else went in, the money was set aside in SSA, and that was an agreement that when that stopped being needed, and the village has used it to pay off the notes and bonds and stuff. And then now they're saying, okay, we want to give us half of what you've been giving us. We're supposed to feel good that we're paying only half as bad. I mean, I'm not getting anything, you know. When we sit down and someone says you got better landscaping, better snow removal, you know, our building itself is contributing to the SSA somewhere about $70,000. You know, I mean, that's
So we do our own landscaping. And we do our own landscaping too.
So, yeah.
We've got our own grass, we have our own.
So one of the things you mentioned was when this was started, and if the debt was paid off, it would be going down. That's part of what's going on. What I can't ever make anybody feel good necessarily about paying taxes, but the answer to your question lies in this right here. This $600,000 question is not yet sorted out. You say, what am I getting for? Why should I feel good about it? Those definitions are still coming. All of this up here, which is 70% of what we're talking about, is being paid by the village now and continuing to be paid by the village. This decrease opportunity is because of exactly what you were talking about. When it started, there was a proposal and it had a debt service with a lot of that infrastructure. What you got for it was an incredibly overhauled downtown. You got a brand new downtown from an infrastructure standpoint 20 years ago. This right here is the answer to your question, which is not fully defined tonight.
Say it again?
This is the answer to your question.
Yeah, you're going to define what you're going to spend that $600,000.
Which is what's still coming.
I'm fine with that. And if you increase the amount of people sharing the pain by increasing the SSA, people that they're saying that come into it, and lower the percentage, okay, I can see when you point out that, okay, where we're at, that they're doing some nicer landscaping, or that the corners are safer or something, I can say, okay, that does make my home more valuable, okay? But just to say because my value goes up, that I should pay more to support downtown, wait a minute, I'm missing something. I'm already paying 80% of my taxes for being in Downers Grove. The highest, this 1.5% right now, there's only two things higher on my tax bill, the high school percentage and the grade schools. Those are, and then the 1.5 that I'm paying that I didn't pay when I lived in Orchard Brook for 35 years. You know, so
the bulk of which is that debt retirement, which is nearing.
Say it again?
The bulk of which is that debt retirement, which is nearing that. So we're talking about halving the rate. I mean, it's.
You could quarter it. You could quarter it again by getting rid of the downtown management funding.
It's a possibility.
I mean, do you have? I mean, how many layers do you have to pay to manage the process?
Come on, let's give everybody a chance. Continuing across the middle row there, anybody else?
Please,
go ahead.
A couple questions. Jeff Horvath. I have a couple questions and then some comments. First question was, do renters contribute into the SSA?
No.
Indirect.
I'm sorry, this is for
The property is taxed the same, so the property owner is paying in the SSA.
property owner
Undoubtedly.
on the valuation of the
undoubtedly that's
total
in the
property,
right
right?
calculation, yeah.
Okay, no, that's good to know. And then the Downtown Management Corporation, the village has been contributing for a long, long time to, right, the DMC. Are there any performance measurements or criteria that the council places upon this management committee? For example, to ensure that the residents are getting return on the investment at adequate level. So things like increase in number of businesses, diversity of those businesses, operating hours that residents can use. I've been here for 28 years, and I still don't think I can do much shopping when I take the train back from the city after 6 p.m., for example. You know, I can get something to eat or drink, but I don't know that I can really do much shopping. And what loathed me for years, I couldn't even buy my, before wife she left, because she was angry, I couldn't get her flowers because there was no shop open late. So that's the question, right? If we're going to be paying $300,000 into that, I mean, that's CEO pay. You know,
Yeah.
I would expect that management corporation, these are good business owners, right? They should be able to manage themselves. They should, if we want services like festivals and stuff, put it into Parks and Rec.
Right.
Let them take care of it for the village. For me as a resident, I don't need the Downtown Management Corporation sponsoring something to build their business. Let them build their business. That's a cost of doing business.
Social media is building their business.
Hey, Jeff, let me stop you, please stop you on that subject. It sounds like you got another one.
I do have another one.
The short answer is no, in terms of metrics.
And that's not good business for us.
The bigger answer is that group is largely self-determined and therefore self-managed. Those folks that are on that board are elected by this group of people downtown, which is residents, property owners, and business owners. They all have a process by which they can elect members to represent them. They operate independently in that sense of the village. We don't have sort of an direct operational oversight, so we're not applying metrics. But they do have a process by which those people who are guiding that board, the board of directors that manage Erin and her staff, that board of directors there's a process by which all of you could change that board of directors. That's the first thing. Second thing is, important to keep in mind, just so that everybody is thinking this stuff through, Parks and Rec is literally not us. It's an
No, I get
entire-
that. Yeah.
So when you talk about alternative ideas, whatever they might be, just remember that it's not as a matter of these folks up here telling somebody to do something. Right? Because it's down to, like, the Park District is...
He's a resident. He's a resident.
Right, but you'd have to have, if you said we're going to not do whatever it is the downtown management does, we're going to have somebody else do that. To have someone else do that is way beyond this group. That's just the thing to keep in mind. It's not impossible, I don't mean to say that, but as you define what downtown management does and whether you see it as being valuable, just remember that those aspects that you do think are valuable, you think someone else could do cheaper or someone else should do within their existing cost structure, is not an automatic thing. You can't just tell them to do it.
Yeah.
So go ahead with
But
the second.
just the whole concept of downtown management, of being an entity, an independent entity, self-governing, self-managing, self-directing. The village should not be a philanthropic to a business entity like that, in my opinion. And that's
We're not.
That's what, well, when we're paying them $300,000 and we don't know, we're not holding to any criteria, we're not quite sure what we're getting in return year to year until they announce. That's somewhat, like, I can feel their hands saying, yeah, just give me the money. So I would urge you to, yeah, definitely look at that agreement and shorten it if you're going to continue it. Put performance criteria on it, like any good businessman or woman would. Put performance criteria and hold them to it annually. So, the other question I had on the parking system improvements. So, you know, we have parking capacity issues. And is that what that is? Parking system improvements? It's capacity. It's the whole caboodle capacity solutions. Okay.
It certainly includes that. It includes how the system functions and looking for ways to improve its efficiency. First and foremost, before any consideration of expansion, which obviously is much more costly.
So I'm not in a special services area to the best of my knowledge. I don't think I am. But it is a dilemma. I can certainly see that. Yes, the residents within that area do in fact receive benefit, different than I outside the area, far outside the area, from having some of those special services. So that's why I get that as a real challenge to manage. When it comes to like parking, why do our bodies like the, was it zoning or planning, take the Marquee, for instance, where they weren't required to build a parking structure. They weren't required to have, not at the level of density required based on their population.
They met our code.
So yes, I understand.
That's a little bit of a rabbit trail.
Okay, we have different opinions
Yeah,
perhaps on that, or different viewpoints on it.
They were required. Whether it was sufficient enough, we could argue about, but they absolutely were
Right. So
required. to
things
go
like that, again, it gets back to, I don't think bearing the burden on the residents. If truly the valuation of the home increases by the virtue of proximity to a vibrant downtown area, the village's vested interest in maintaining as a vibrant downtown area, then by default, those residents are going to be paying more into the coffers of the village based on standard taxation, because their valuation is higher. So, yeah, I would look at ways to, I would encourage you to look at ways to drop that even more. Challenge yourself to go to 0.5% or 0.2%, and say, what does that look like, instead of sticking up, on only this halfway. Thank you.
Come back this way. Start on this end. Anything?
Do you want to have anything? Liz Chalbert. I also was in the TCD2 when it was going through its gyrations 25 years ago. And as I recall it, and I'm hoping that there will be information provided that represent other communities and how they manage their downtowns, the old parks, the Hinsdales, all of the places that have denser downtowns where people want to live, as opposed to living in a condo somewhere way out on the fringes of the community. They want to live downtown, and there's a reason they want to live downtown. And the primary reason that I recall for having a downtown management corporation is to keep the downtown vibrant, fill empty spaces. I can recall what the downtown looked like 25, 30 years ago. Downtown spaces could go vacant for a year or two, and it would just have paper up on the windows, and it was like it likes in peaks and valleys, but at times it was very difficult to fill space. At the time, it was ranged between $5 and $7 a square foot. Now the per square foot is between 13 and 26, and maybe even a little higher. So there is a desire to be in the downtown, not only from a residential standpoint, because those property values are much higher in the downtown than on the periphery of the downtown, but there's a desire to have your business located downtown, so that you have an opportunity to deal with all the people coming to the restaurants. And that's what Downtown Management Corporation is supposed to do, is fill space, have events, sidewalk sales, bring shoppers down so they'll bring their money. And that's taxes back in our coffers to help decrease our regular property taxes. So I really do feel that there's a great advantage to having someone actually managing the downtown business aspects, and that includes business owners. Their part, that's the board, is the Downtown Management Corporation, are downtown business owners. They have somebody leading them, and that's Erin, was Linda Kunze, before her passing. And so it is a much more vibrant downtown than it was ever before. And I feel that there's a great benefit to the folks that live down there. Walk out your door, walk downstairs, go to a restaurant. I happen to live in the downtown area also. I do think that there's a great value, and I'm hoping that there's a way for the Downtown Management Corporation to provide some statistics to show what they have done over the last 25 years. What businesses have they brought in? What restaurants have they brought in? We're getting new restaurants all the time. And he's right. times have changed. At times I bemoan the fact that there's a lot of retail space that has been taken up with other kinds of businesses, and we had a choice to restrict, and the choice was declined. There was a choice to restrict first floor to just retail, and that did not go by, that just didn't go. We didn't want to infringe on a business owner's right to lease it out. So we now have very little retail space. But when you go downtown, or Bucktown, or one of those other areas, you don't see a lot of retail. You see restaurants. The young people want to get out and go to a restaurant. We are a busy downtown, and we should be happy about it. And that's part and parcel of what that organization does. And then I'll finish just by saying that 25 years ago, things cost X, and I don't know about anybody else's, but 25 years later, it costs X plus 25 years later. It costs money to maintain the downtown. We have crosswalks that have bricks that need to be replaced. We have trees that were fought for to be in the downtown because there weren't going to be any trees, and now we have trees, and they're different than the trees in the parkways in your residential neighborhoods. They have special maintenance. There's Christmas lights in order to bring ambiance to the downtown. There's all kinds of things, and I'm certainly hoping that there's an opportunity to see the large, broad list of what makes downtown Downers Grove a cool place to be, and that's what that money goes for.
Hi, my name is Sue Steely. I live in Downers Grove, and I just have a question. How many of the people that live in the downtown area are using the parking deck? I mean, it seems to me it's of greater benefit to all those people coming from the train that are going to other parts of the town, or other towns even, or for people coming to shopping. I don't know how many residents are using the parking deck, and so, you know, the people that are paying for it in their taxes aren't getting much benefit from the parking deck.
I think the parking study will give us a lot of insight, which is coming shortly, that we just went through. That's the first thing. We'll probably have a good handle on that.
Okay.
Second thing, though, it's important to understand, back to this, we're talking about the go forward, paying for that parking deck is for the people that are using the deck, not property taxes. And that's,
I mean, you talked about some building that didn't
there's been a lot of conversations.
Parking, so I'm
Yeah.
wondering if people from some of those new buildings are parking in the parking deck. I don't know.
If they have an extra car, they are.
Oh, okay.
We'll have some of that data shortly.
Okay, good, thank you.
A good question, Mark. We need to know the answer.
Well, somebody two doors down in my hallway got a parking spot in the garage, and he paid the normal rate that anybody would, regardless of, I don't know if there's a resident rate, but he had to pay the full rate.
$3 a day?
Well, he pays some larger monthly or quarterly fee or something. But he had a contract for a spot as if he was anybody else in the garage.
Interesting, thank you.
I mean, I guess I'm going to say a lot of things that other people have already said, but I want to start out with something that I was struck by in reviewing the comprehensive plan for the village. And then I wish I would have printed this page out, but take my word for it, it's almost there word for word. In the comprehensive plan for the village, it has a section on the downtown business district. And the sentence that it writes about it is the downtown business district is the heart of the village. And what I'm struck by is this confusion between an SSA that's expiring and, boy, we could just roll in another one right behind it and just keep calling it an SSA, as if somehow people that live in this gerrymandered boundary are responsible for the heart of the village. And everybody else, look at all the other space other than that red space behind that fellow's head. They have no responsibility to the heart of the village.
Well, they have about 65% of the responsibility.
No, I'm saying, and no extraordinary responsibility. Now, to your point on the number ones and number twos, just to tie all the threads together, and it's been mentioned by other people, and I looked up the credentials of the people on your staff. I'm I'm a U of I urban planner also, later becoming an MBA, but it's classic land use theory that when you have property close to something in a tractor like a downtown train station, you are going to have high property values diminishing going outwards, just generally speaking as a most general model. That means anybody who lives downtown on a per square foot basis, if you grab a 2-bedroom apartment of a downtown condo and get a 2-bedroom condo someplace else in the village, I just did a real quick check, we're roughly paying about $100,000 more for that property because it's downtown. And that's the way it should be. Land use theory tells us you should pay, and that equals about 50% more, $300,000 roughly versus $200,000 or depending, but for a 2-bedroom condo. That means we're already, if it's a $300,000 condo, we're already, as residents, paying 50% more just because we own a piece of property that's 50% more. And it's exactly 50% more because we are downtown. You can trace the cause of why we pay higher property taxes. One of the things that I wish you will do for this exercise is, because I don't like how you're doing this shenanigans about taking the 10% out and everything, is you should look on the tax bill for the village, and whether you include the pension funds or not, take a look at a unit that's $600,000, I don't care, pick a round number, $500,000 downtown, $500,000 outside a proposed SSA, and just look at what you charge us as Downers Grove, okay? Probably, so we, 1.5%, and I don't, what's the sum of all the other, you know the sum of all the rates that the village charges us, whether you include pensions or not? Would it be equal to that or less than that, you think? I think it's about less than that.
I'm not quite following the math, but we can get you, we'll get the council.
No, but I'm just saying, take out the school districts, the park districts, the library, only count what you, because you keep coming back to, let's be, we're only responsible for a part of this whole puzzle here. We can't do what the DMC can do. We can't do what the park district can do. We can only do what the village can do. And I'm telling you, you will have a totally different view of the burden that you are putting on these people who, don't forget land use theory, are already disproportionately paying more, as they should, because their value is worth more. But you're layering on top of that an extraordinary charge. When you look at what does the rest of that Downers Grove village charge us versus what does any SSA charge us, even at a 7.5% rate, you'll be astounded by how much more the ask is.
That was the number that I asked for first.
Right, but I'm saying, but if you separate out just what the part, and no, you know, the problem here is that, as someone else also pointed out, that this hides all the numbers within what the school districts are doing to us. And I would rather you own up to the responsibility, because really, I mean, in just flat out terms, what you're saying is, we have this downtown district that's the heart of the village. We need to keep it going, even though I've only lived here a short while. I've lived in the western suburbs for 20 years, and I've been coming to Angelo's Pizza for 20 years. God bless them. So I know what you've done. You did do, well, as you said, an extraordinary thing. You came up with a financing method to do something extraordinary, which was basically rebuild downtown while people were living and working in it. But the problem's moved on now, and you have needs. And I'm just, you have to just boldly say, I know it's easier for you to tax a small minority of the village than all villagers. You'll all be thrown out if you tax 100% of Downers Grove. I'm just putting it very, very baldly. If you tax that entire area for the $600,000 you need every year, you'll all be out of office. And so I know what this is that you're saying, okay, well, how can we just tax a minority of them such that the entire village gets the good and the small amount of them pay the bill? And all I'm saying is that goes to why change the existing boundaries, is we're asking you, how brave can you be in expanding the boundary to get more people in the village? To me, it's a concentric circle problem. Absent any barrier, it's a concentric circle problem. There's a technical issue on the existing boundaries. You're talking about, you're going to take the properties that we're on right now, hopefully build a new police station and fire station. And I think I saw on the plan, It'd be that one of the ways to make it work is to put 7 townhouses and a medical office building on the same lot. This lot's not in the existing boundary. And that's why we're asking you to make sure that you're very careful about what boundary you draw. Don't imitate any boundary and just pick it up from a previous plan. In some sense, if you're going to take and tax a minority of the village for something that is the heart of the village, then how brave can you be in drawing that boundary to make it as fair as possible to those of us that when you look at your tax bill, you'll see, as a taxing body, what an extraordinary level of commitment you're asking for our residents. And lastly, to the services, I would put the question of the services to you differently. If anyone says to you, what benefits do the residents get? I would say, no, let's phrase the question differently. Pick me a downtown benefit and tell me, how do the businesses benefit from it? How do the residents benefit? And how do the darn commuters benefit? The flip side of that question is, would you do that same benefit if there were no residents? Would you plow the downtown streets if there were no residents? Would you landscape Main Street if there were no residents? And when you look at those questions and you ask yourself, would we spend $600,000 a year if there were no residents? And you say, you know what, we probably would. Well, then what are you taxing the downtown residents for? And I understand that these are all questions you have to juggle, and I'm not asking you to give me a black and white answer. I know the answer is going to be a gray answer. I'm just asking for a fair gray answer. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and we'll work through specifically that tax rate issue, because I think you're exactly right. That's a number that people ought to understand. I suspect it's not as much as you think, because a lot of it's going away. And if you look at that total tax bill, we're 9% for everybody, so we're probably around 15 to 17, my gut, for downtown. Your $8,000 bill, you ask how much is just the village, it's $800 plus the TIF. So
well,
the
no,
TIF,
currently.
The TIF is, right. But so we're going to get that number. It's a real good.
Right. Well, all I'm saying is that when you work with these percentages, you don't understand what you're asking us for when you're working with percentages. I'll phrase it differently. Take how much you're going to ask for, and again, they'll be juggling around when the TIF expires and all that. But take how much you're asking us for just as a village taxing body, and then separately, okay, if we create any new SSA, not a continuation, if we create a new SSA, how much is that ask compared to what we're asking anybody else in the village on a per $100,000 value? And bearing in mind that anything about number ones and number twos, anything where you say, well, everybody in the village pays for it. Yes, everyone in the village pays for it because we live in high value property. We disproportionately pay for it. So you'll never change our minds on that issue. We're paying our fair share on 1 and 2.
Everybody is pretty sure they're paying their fair share. What is true, we're going back to.
No, I was just asking about, because we have seniors in the group, right? And there's senior freezes. Do the SSA, I mean, if they freeze, the SSA freezes too, or it gets added anyway?
No.
Anybody?
SSA will be still whatever
So
it is.
you could go get your senior freeze, but you're still going to have.
Yeah, that
Okay.
your SSA isn't part of your property, it's on your property tax bill, but it's a separate line.
The freeze affects the assessed value.
Yeah,
not the rate.
This is, I don't want to just blow past this. I know you're thinking this is kind of, gerrymandering data. But it's important to realize that when you say how brave we are, we're taxing $1 million to the rest of the village to plow sidewalks. We're not doing that over at Maple and Mackey. We're taxing $1 million to the rest of the village to do plantings and weedings and water flower pots. We're not doing that in the Lester neighborhood. So there is some very real value that has nothing to do with this additional $600,000 that's being taxed to the rest of the village for those downtown residents and businesses. It's both. So it isn't just a special thing for the downtown.
Right, except for as residents, because we live in higher value properties, specifically because we're downtown. Actually, I'm glad you pointed to number 2. I don't think anybody, I'd be surprised if anyone's mentioned you. Every time you give away a free parking spot, who do you think pays for it?
The other parkers.
No.
Yeah.
The residents.
No, because all these guys right here are paying for that parking garage. The people that are using it. That's who's paying for it.
Have you done a study to see if you could raise the rates of the parking garage users?
Help me with that, because it's a whole bailiwick with Metro.
That's going to come up in the results of the parking study, which will be out next month.
It's never as straight as you wish, because Metro unfortunately is involved in some of those conversations, but yes, it's part of what we're going to help. You had a question a long time ago.
Well, I have a statement and a couple of questions. One, when you, sir, when you had that meeting last night, what was the results of the feelings of the HOAs outside the special service area toward expanding the special service area versus the people inside the special service area that are already paying?
Sure. Okay. These were individuals who served as HOA presidents within the SSA boundaries.
Oh, it was just within the SOA. Second of all, on the TIF part of this, that is going to also end, am I correct?
Correct. It's set to expire.
And there is no plan to renew the TIF?
No plan to.
Okay. I live within the SSA for the last 5 years. Lived in the western suburbs for 35 years. And I paid $14,000 worth of taxes to the SSA for the last 5 years. And I will probably continue on for the next 2 years.
$15,000 a year in the SSA?
Yeah.
Total.
5 years. Total.
5 years. Oh, sure.
About 3,000.
Sure, okay.
2,800 is going to be 3,000 each year. And I don't, and I love the downtown, located there because of the downtown. I was surprised to see my extra tax, and the people right across the street from me didn't pay the tax, and nobody in the historic district paid that tax, and they could walk 50 feet further than I, some of them, maybe 150 feet further, and get the benefits of the downtown. So that's one problem. Is the $600,000 to the management group going to be the target, therefore your assessment at 0.75 or 0.50 or whatever, dependent on expanding the boundaries, which I agree with the gentleman is a political, could be a political problem, because I'm sure the people outside the special service area are going to say, whoa, I don't want extra taxes, okay? So you're going to have that problem. So the issue of how much you're going to give and more defined benefits. The landscaping may be going to the businesses and maybe going to Main Street, but other than a flower pot or two on the lamp pole, all the landscaping in my building is done by us, okay? The parkways were never well maintained, and the sidewalks at times are maintained, but not well. And the alley behind my building, which we've asked to get fully paved for years, and they keep saying, oh, we're going to do that, has not been done. And we're in the SSA, and I wonder where my taxes are going.
Where are you located?
4929 Forest Avenue. Okay. And our association president is a member, is finally a member of the DDS. Because until last year, residents did not have representation. They finally have it now. Okay, and that's an improvement. But the issue for you, as other people have said, is to put, what are we getting for the money? How much are we going to give them? What are we getting for the money? I agree that the restaurants are increasing, but the diversity of other retail is dropping as rents are skyrocketing. Jean's boutique is moving out. It's been there for a number of years. There've been a number of boutiques that moved out. We're getting more restaurants. I agree, the population is changing, more rental units, younger people, and that's going to give a different dimension to the downtown. So we want a vibrant downtown. We'd love to spread it, the tax burden over, but it will be a political problem for you. I absolutely understand that. But the issue is, how much money are you going to give to Downtown Management Corporation, and what are you going to get for it? What are specific things that you're going to get for it, and can it be done by that management corporation or cheaper by the village or some other entity?
Everybody got one pass. We're going to make one more pass, and if you please don't feel the need to repeat. We're going to have more meetings, okay? But I don't want to just necessarily cut it off. So I know you had one more thing, I think?
No.
No? Okay, then in the back, we'll go there.
Hi, Bill Marshall. Just to help you out with the tone of the meeting last night with the HOA presidents. They were all in favor of expanding the SSA area, and that's one thing. But I'm not taking sides here. I'm a member of the DMC board, and I'm not taking any sides here. I just want to know, and in conjunction with what Dave Nicholson has kind of mentioned, have we looked at any other sources of revenue to continue this? I mean, through taxation, through some kind of fundraising, or anything other than this is what I'm saying. Have we looked at how we can continue to get that $600,000 going forward? Have we looked at that? Have we looked at a clean slate and said, let's brainstorm and come up with some ideas? Have we done that? And that's what I think we should at least have that opportunity to see. I mean, you guys were talking about the marijuana and all the information that you guys wanted today on the marijuana. So let's kind of do that kind of homework for this, because this is affecting a lot of people and costing a lot of money.
So the answer to that is yes, and we'll get it to you, because when Mike started the conversation, he said from January to June of last year, we had an ad hoc committee. They did all that work, and we will get their findings to the council and to everybody on downtown management.
Okay, I was at those ad hoc meetings, okay, so I don't know if we discussed like merging the DMC with, you know, with the city, okay, or the village, or, you know, merging them with the downtown economic group, or I don't remember saying anything, hearing about getting that money from the taxes that are collected from the businesses downtown and subsidizing it. Maybe I missed all that, but I don't remember any of that.
We'll get that report out
Okay,
and then
all
see.
right.
I think, Liz, to your question earlier, some of that's in there as well, what other communities do. Now, there was some look beyond ourselves to get some sense to. Okay.
I have a quick question. If there is a new SSA that includes a downtown management corporation, I think that means, I'm trying to remember from all the documents I've read just in the last 2 days, who sets the operation of downtown management in terms of the control? I thought that was buried in a resolution or an ordinance.
An operating agreement. Dave, you can talk a little bit more about the operating agreement and how that works.
Sure. The first concept is the Downtown Management Corporation is an independent organization, 501c3.
Well, I'm not looking for an explanation so much as I heard the story and heard what everybody went through to get residents on the current Downtown Management Corporation. And all I'm saying is if there's a pass through this again in the future, please write something that's crystal clear that says the residents have a role at the table.
We don't have, my point was the Village of Downers Grove does not control that directly.
Right.
The bylaws are under the complete autonomous control of that group, and they are the ones that decide that. So you can talk to Mr. Marshall here, he's the best person to talk to.
We have changed our bylaws. We just did that this summer.
Okay.
They have, the homeowners have 3 board members out of 8 right now, and there's rules that certain amount of board members have to be owners of buildings downtown. They have to have 2 of those, and what, 3 of ours and 3 of...
3 business owners.
3 business, 3 business, 3 building owners, and 3 condo owners.
I didn't mean to hold.
Oh, that's okay. I'm sure you're not dealing with these questions. Okay, any other council comments or questions for the evening? Rich, go ahead, Rich.
No, go ahead. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around exactly what services we provide that are specific, detailed, snow plowing, landscaping. That should be some finite number. And then I think we absolutely need a downtown management. I started in this town in 1953. My mother worked downtown. I saw the downtown dying 25 years ago. And we definitely need an entity that will bring businesses in. A certain specific owner doesn't have the resources to scour the country to try to get retailers into downtown. I think it's very, very vibrant. The other thing I'd ask you is, if in my particular neighborhood near Downers Grove South, if I asked you guys to increase your taxes to cover my snow plowing and my landscaping and other beautification things, and I'd also like a restaurant within walking distance, what would be the value to you for me to do that? Because I can't walk to a restaurant. I mean, I guess I could if I wanted to walk a mile. So that's more of an intrinsic value. Some of these are specific values. Being able to walk to a restaurant, being able to walk to the car show, being able to walk to the train station, a little bit less specific, but more built into the value.
Craig?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with the need for a downtown management corporation. I'm actually kind of surprised at the vitriol against the idea. We've got an awful lot of residents downtown now. Obviously, we're hearing from some tonight. We have a lot of businesses downtown, and one of the big reasons why our downtown has thrived the way it has over the last 20 years or so was a lady that we named a plaza after, and she was mentioned earlier, Linda Kunze, who headed the Downtown Management Corporation. I think she did tremendous work, and we need to continue that work. And the best way to do that is with an outside entity, not the government, running a lot of the things that have been going on. Are there ways to modify that? Sounds like we're talking about operating agreement changes as part of all of this process. Obviously, things don't have to remain exactly the way they are, but do we need someone holding that steering wheel? Yes, I believe we do. It's been raised earlier that raising taxes is a difficult thing. It is. But we provide a lot of services, and those services cost money. This village council and prior village councils have made tough decisions. In 2011, I think it was the creation of the stormwater utility. More recently, the food and beverage tax. We pass along the increase in costs on public safety pensions every year. And let's make no mistake, they earn every dime they get, but those costs continue to go up. This village continually makes the tough decisions when they are required, and I don't think anybody should make any mistake about that. Thank you, Mayor.
I think it would be helpful if we got maybe a list of events that the downtown management actually sponsors. If we had some actual, we kind of can think, sometimes you can think of one here or there, you think the car show, or you think, the art festival's coming up, but you forget then, oh, there's the Christmas lights and this and that and the other thing. There's a lot that they try to cram in there, and if we could at least get a handle on what they are doing, that would be very helpful.
And also businesses that they've brought in. Really, I feel like what everybody is looking for, at least in terms of downtown management, is something that they can see. What is being done, a list of things that makes it a benefit. Essentially, prove its worth, I think is what the residents are looking for.
And that's not vitriol. It's not
No, it's not vitriol at all.
Right.
I think but also commercial real estate brokers bring your businesses to downtown, or Downers Grove. It's not just the management corporation. I'd say it's your owners and, and brokers. There's no national tenants down there, so.
Anything else from the council? One thing I'd like to encourage everybody to do is these A, B, and C bottom line things here are getting ferreted out over the next several weeks or months. And so we have business owners, we have property owners, and we have residents, commercial property owners, business owners, and residents in the audience here. Make sure that you are engaging your representatives, whether that's HOA boards and presidents or Downtown Management Corporation, with this same information, because they will be working with village officials to try and ferret out what that operating agreement looks like. And at the end of the day, this is going to be about, do we think this provides good value? Is this $600,000 providing good value? Well, it's going to get, that answer is going to come through these definitions. So to whatever degree you can, please continue your conversations at the other end so that that all comes, works back up through the process. And with that, Dave, you have anything else you want to add?
No, sir. Thank you.
Mike, you have anything else you want to add?
No, it's been very helpful. Thank you for all the
Thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you. You guys did a
Staying-
great job.
Staying through the marijuana discussion.
Motion to
Do we have a
adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor, say aye.